tell me this, do you enjoy negotiating?
I spent my life doing it. I suppose I do. I've got teams of people that do it for me now, the ones I used to do, whether it be aeropolitics or aircraft or commercial.
And what's the secret you tell them? What's the secret for negotiations now? Look, boys and girls, this is the deal.
Well, outthink them. Know exactly what they're likely to be negotiating. Know their position, and then have the counter position ready before you enter the negotiations. And also, you've got to be fairly quick on your feet. You've got to think carefully. You've got to think articulately. Do not go off at a tangent. Do not overreact to things. Be measured about what you do, but be firm and fair about how you go about it. You know, if you're trying to consummate a deal, try and see that they need a margin, so do you. So somehow you get there.
Tell me, who was the hardest then to negotiate with?
Airbus. Yeah, but they were great fun. It was like games of chess all the time. It was, and I think we got some really good deals as a result of all the work that we did with them.
It was 1985, and there were 2 aircraft. Today, there's more than 270. We're at Emirates HQ, along with Sir Tim Clark, the president of the company. It's just turned in a $5.8 billion profit for the last financial year, and this man and the team are responsible for nearly 20% of the GDP of Dubai. Sir Tim Clark, welcome to The National.
Thank you.
Did you ever think when you joined this company in 1985 that you'd get to such a staggering number of nearly $6 billion in profit and have this colossus that it is?
In a word, no. In 1985, what we were looking at in those days was the likes of Gulf Air, Kuwait Airways, Saudi Air, Egypt Air, Royal Air Morocco, Jordanian, MEA. These were the kind of carriers that were the Middle East stalwarts. And we thought at that stage, and I believe probably when the government formed it for the reasons that we know, that's probably they thought where we would go with all of this. But, you know, things have changed.
You went much further than that, I would say. But this goes back to probably how you grew up, or the era that you grew up in, which was the 60s and the 70s. And the sort of, I didn't see that then, but you did. The sheer sort of elegance of travel. Did that influence your plans, your imagination?
From a personal point of view, I had watched in the 10 years between 1975 and 85 when I worked for Gulf Air, I followed and I was party to the way they developed their in-flight product and the whole of the passenger services side of things. And if those of us remember the old TriStars of Gulf Air, they had a big bar in the back of first class. They had a boutique read. You can start to see how some of the seeding of those ideas started to appear in Emirates later on. So I was exposed to what became a hugely successful carrier in those 10 years. Certainly I was there. And it outsurpassed and outperformed all its peer group, whether the ones I mentioned, Kuwait Airways, et cetera, et cetera. And when the government of Dubai invited people like me to come across and map out what the airline was going to look like, in my back of my mind, I was thinking the Gulf Air that I knew I just left, and how this could transpose itself into the working model of the Emirates of the future. But in those days, we were thinking we would be a regional carrier. We'd be operating a few long-haul operations and mainly doing the job of serving the countries around Dubai, the UAE. Didn't quite work out that way. And certainly in my own mind, when I was the sort of planner of the airline, said we must now accelerate our long-haul ambitions and aspirations, and we must move at pace to do that. So a lot of what we did with regard to the acquisition of initially the 310s and the A300, 600Rs was part of that, to push out beyond the region and start the beginnings of what has become a super connector, the hub that we have today.
Was that a moment for you with Sheikh Ahmed where you sat down and went, okay, we're going to go for gold?
Well, obviously, it required a certain amount of persuasion to go from 737s and things like that to go into the big league. And there was a certain amount of trepidation, of course there would have been. I said, well, if we do this right, what you're competing against today, Reed, 85, is our levels of mediocrity, very constrained in what they do and how they do it. Many of the carriers that we are competing against are state-owned. So you had Lufthansa, Air France, BOAC, BEA had merged, but they were still very much in the legacy of civil servants. So it wasn't very difficult to envisage how you could penetrate that kind of morass of what I call mediocrity in the way they went about planning their products, planning their route networks, generally predetermined by the way traffic moved after the Second World War and how they aligned what they did with the old colonial powers. So they tended to bring everything over their hubs wherever you wanted to go. So it wasn't then difficult to look at what could happen if we were to reassess how that traffic would flow if we provided the connectivity. So in the early days, this was a little bit of an experiment. It was not without its risk because we were committing the shareholders to quite a lot of money in terms of what they had originally thought we were going to do. But as we picked that one up and it started to scale, then the rest became history, the early 90s.
And it became a very competitive landscape. British Airways, Virgin, the up one, is it fair to say, an upstart from Richard Branson, but you had Willie Walsh at British Airways, you had Virgin. Did you ever look at them and sort of go, I want that crown? Because British Airways really did reinvent itself, as it were. Did you look at that and go, I want that crown. I want to be the premier airline of the world?
Well, I think the ruler of Dubai, in the very early stages, had said that Dubai had to be number one in all sorts of things. You probably remember many times that he wanted the airline, because by that time we were scaling at pace. We got the 777s in, latterly the 380s, etc. And the more we did, the more we got. The more successful we became. So then I think the government began to be even more convinced that we could be number one, whatever. That wasn't what we set out to do. We just set out to grow this model, doing a lot of things differently to other carriers. And of course, they then got very upset about that and accused us of taking money from the government, being subsidized and all the other things, just because we were so successful in what we did. And we were quite prepared to be fairly brazen in how we did this, whether it be products coming to the market, way we designed aeroplanes, designed the interiors of aeroplanes, went well beyond what the normal carriers had done in the past. So our voice began to be heard in a manner that you talk about Willie Walsh, you talk about, there are many.
I suppose there are people I grew up with, that came into my sideline. So,
but I go back to John King and Colin Marshall, yes. and Richard Branson, of course, was coming up at the time, but he sort of got to a plateau, and that's where he is. He hasn't really got much bigger than he was by about the early 2000s, and now he's half owned by Delta and all the other bits and pieces. We were convinced that we would stay away from alliances, by and large stay away from any kind of equity swap, etc., and we would simply grow organically the business that we believe that we were very successful in doing up to that point.
Was there a moment in that speed of growth where you said, yeah, actually, you know what, we've made it, we're done. I made $1 billion, got a lot of new aircraft, this is the top?
No, you're talking to the wrong guy about that. No, this was onwards, upwards. For me, I couldn't see a point when I looked at the way we could now reach most cities on the planet, how the 380 was scaling our operation. I thought there is so much more to do even today, even though we said we have 270 aircraft, well, 271 if you include our little corporate jet, and the 300 odd aircraft we have on order, and how the network is going to expand over the next 10 or 15 years. You really haven't seen anything yet. So there's a lot to do. At no point did we actually say, well, that's it. We've reached the limit of our capabilities. And at the same time, of course, you saw many other new carriers in the region say, well, hey-ho, we need a bit of this. Why don't we change our business model? So you saw Qatar Airways form, you saw Etihad form, Oman Air form, latterly Riyadh Air. A lot of these carriers are picking up on the business model that we constructed back in the early days. And I think they're making quite a good job of it, frankly. I mean,
do you think any of them can actually catch up with it? I saw Tony Douglas last week when I was in Riyadh. Great salesman.
Yeah.
Sells a great story. But have you enough of a moat around Emirates that actually, Manus, I don't think anybody can catch up with this? Or is that a folly to think like that?
Well, you should never really rest on your laurels, quite honest. It's something you need to keep on top of. So we'll continue to do it the Emirates way, which is hugely innovative in what it does in its products, both on the ground and in the air. It will continue to grow its network. It will continue to make demands on the aviation community with regard to aerospace OEMs, the way we go about designing aeroplanes. We've got a lot on the table at the moment that we're making demands of the carriers. So we will continue to do that. And, you know, the likes of Riyadh Air and New Kid on the Block.
Tony would be delighted to be referred to as that.
But good luck. We were there once, don't forget. And I was asked the other day in Seville about, is there enough room for everybody? And I said, you asked me that 35 years ago. And then you asked me in when Etihad was formed, and Qatar Airways was formed. And look how these carriers have expanded, and actually quite successfully. So why would it be any different for Riyadh Air, given what's going on in Saudi Arabia?
But to expand means you need additional new fleet. The A380 will sunset. We'll come back to that in a moment. Now, Boeing is a very contentious issue for yourself and for Michael O'Leary in terms of what they promised and what they're not delivering. The 777X is now delayed to 2027. So, Tim, when realistically can you say to me, Manus, I feel confident I will get one 777X?
Well, to be quite honest, we had been working with Boeing, as you know, very closely over the last few months, few years. We had a belief that we would have our first aircraft in the last quarter calendar of this year.
Yep.
And all our seats and galleys and televisions all ready to go. Now, that doesn't look as though it's going to happen. So when they say they pushed it to 27, that's a 12-month period. Am I looking at the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, fourth quarter? To be quite honest, we had made our own plans with regard to when we thought it was going to happen. Fortunately, as you will have read, back from 21, we took the decision to revitalize the old fleet.
Yes.
So and thank goodness we did that, and we didn't start getting rid of them, etc. And it's fine, we have a huge capacity hole. So that refurbishment is going on. So if the 777 comes in 21, it's bad news for us. It's 7 years after we expected it to happen.
Do you think it's going to be the back? Realistically, what has Kelly Ortberg promised you? The back end of 27?
They don't know. They don't know. They honestly don't know.
Well, you've already spent $5 billion, I understand, and change. I mean, it's an incredible kind of number in terms of refurbishment. Have you asked Boeing to step up to the plate and contribute towards that?
Boeing are fully aware of the damage it has caused Emirates. And the quantification of that damage is one of those things that's out there. Of course it is. And I see that they already planned for a charge of $5 or $6 billion as a result of this further delay. In the end, we're interested in getting this aeroplane in. We're not after trying to extract value from these people because it'll have to happen at some point. But the main focus is getting this aircraft out. After all, it was our initiative that got this whole thing started in the first place in 2010. We thought by 2021 or 2020, we would have the aircraft flying. So 17 years later, we might have it. And that's something we're more concerned about that and receiving the damages. Of course, we will have that conversation with Boeing. How we deal with that is an internal matter.
in terms of your ambition to expand, does this materially constrain your ability to break new profitable ground?
It's already having that effect. We have many routes on the drawing board which we would like to execute now and can't. Fortunately, we've got 13 A350s of the number that we've ordered. And they will sort of keep the wolf from the door for the time being. And also the retrofit of more and more aircraft of the old fleet keeps our head above water, allows us to grow capacity, but at a much lower level than we used to do in the past.
Looking out at the runway, this is prime time that we're here at HQ. The livery is there. The A380 is something that, for me, I can remember sitting on it for the first time, and it's pretty staggering. And when you get to sit in business class, it's even more staggering. But don't worry, I've been in all the cabins. When that winds down, we've got a model of it here. When that winds down, is it the end of an era?
Mm-hmm. I cannot persuade either side of the ledger to build a look-alike. They are very risk averse, as you can imagine, Boeing for whatever reasons, and Airbus seems to be fairly content with large numbers of single aisle going out the door and making their balance sheet look very good. I don't see the innovation or flair that I used to see in the 70s and 80s and the early 90s. So the notion that we would have something like a 380 replacement, which I reckon could be 20-25% less in its operating costs than the current one, is something that they're not prepared to undertake.
Why is there that lack of ambition?
I don't know. I think in the last 20 years, there's been a huge amount of trauma, geopolitical, socioeconomic, and these kind of things very much affect the way airline boards go about the business. So when you had the 2008, 2009 financial crisis, remember, that's when the 380 came to market in 2008, just as the bottom fell out of the global economy. And the old stalwarts who were very much in charge of the airlines then were removed, and in came the lawyers, the finance people, etc., to stabilize companies which were in deep trouble because of the collapse of demand. So if you look at all of that and the wars and insurrections that have been going on, the geopolitics of the planet, etc., it's not surprising that the airline community is a little bit risk averse. So the element of wanting more of things like the 380 or getting the 777 into the air, or getting a bigger 350, or getting Airbus to think larger scale, is not supported by all the other CEOs in the business. So if they were to come up with a business case, ask people what they would think about the 380 replacement, bearing in mind it is barking obvious that it needs to be replaced, given the slot constraints that we face, you'll probably find that they would be saying, ho-hum, we couldn't fill these aeroplanes. This is what they used to say in the early days. Filling 500 passengers on an aeroplane at the 380 is extremely difficult for us.
But now we've gone beyond revenge tourism. I mean, I've been on your planes in the past 6 months, sir. There is no room. I mean, they are rammed.
Completely, yeah.
And you're able to charge a pretty premium, sir, as well.
Yes, we do. And I have to be quite honest. People like me, I'm a pragmatist, I'm an optimist, etc. Nothing really phases me, but I do see some interesting evolutions in demand and the pattern of demand. For instance, prior to COVID, we were charging much lower fares. People were traveling once a year. Post-COVID, we charge much more, and people are now traveling twice a year. So what does that mean? It means that our elasticities forecasting were completely wrong prior to COVID. We could have charged more and got away with it, so to speak. But now we get a much higher yield, considerably higher yield per seat kilometre. And the aircraft are running at 80-85% seat factors. So for something like a 380, once you get above 57, 58%, you're making money. So it's something that when we started getting these profits, the first thing I did after COVID was say, right, we're going to use that money, put more back into product. So we're going to start lifting. Part of that was the redesign of the airplanes, redesign of the product, and the refurbishing of it. So always keep yourself ahead of the game. Use the money that you get in the good times to put back into reinvest in your product, so that the things will get tougher later on. They always do in our business, but you're in a good space then to continue your operation.
It's interesting because financially, the world's had a phenomenal run. Equity markets are on fire. There's a very bullish sentiment in the stock market. Economies around the world are doing fine. We haven't had a jolt to the system since 2008, really. We had COVID, obviously, which was quite traumatic. Do you worry that the cycle is running long? Do you think that we're towards the middle of a cycle? How do you look at the world?
I'm not one of these people who really believes in the cyclical nature of economy, because the global economy is one of those things that can be easily manipulated. It can be directed, it can be channeled, and this is what we see. So you never know what is going to happen next. All you've got to do is what we learned in the 40 years that we've been operating, is that these things happen and they come in shapes and sizes. The 1998 currency crash in the Eastern economies. And I can name all sorts of things going on, whether it be Gaza, whether it be the Iranian-Israeli issues, and all the things in our particular part of the world, as well as what's going on in the Pacific or in Europe, etc. What you have to do is your model has got to be strong enough and insulated enough against all of these things. The bigger we've become, and the greater our reach and the stronger our brand, we found that we've been able to absorb these knocks and continue to grow and be profitable. So we've got to a stage now, we've got a huge amount of experience in managing these things. And if you look at all the traumas in the last 40 years, a lot have been in this part of the world. Yeah. And you see the way Dubai, despite all of that, and this is one of the staggering stories of the millennium, I would say, is that what has happened in this town, this city, as it's transforming itself into a truly global metropolis. This went on with all this going on at the same time. So we're part of a kind of ecosystem, touch wood, I hope it remains that, which is strong enough to deal with global traumas or even regional traumas.
It's interesting. Paul Griffiths, who runs Dubai Airports, was with me a couple of weeks ago, and he said, Emirates, that's you, is the jewel in the crown. If we think about a crown, it's made of metal and jewels. Emirates is the jewel. Fly Dubai is the emerald. DXB is the gold that wraps around the crown. Does the weight of the crown ever sit heavy on you, Sir Tim?
No. Look, I'm an airline manager. I run the business as best I can for the shareholder. So far, so good with all of that. It seems to be getting better as we progress through the years. And this whole thing is a symbiotic kind of relationship that this town has with its airline and all the other sectors of the economy. Look at the way hospitality has exploded. Look at the way the tech side of the economy is going. All those ingredients of the GDP have all flourished one way or the other. Now, of course, we are contributors to that, as they are to what we do. So that's the symbiotic nature of what goes on here. And one of the reasons we are really confident about obviously getting the government to agree the new airport build is that that is almost a linear progression of what we're doing today. And if you keep the ingredients and you keep your eyes fully focused on the way you did it in the past and scaling that going forward, then it's quite an easy one to do. So it's not about what I do, it's what about the government does and how it brings this all together. And there are many players in each of these sectors of the economy. You mentioned Paul, I can mention many people who are heads of their particular segments of the economy who are all very successful as part of that very harmonious relationship that Dubai Inc. is. That is the city today.
To the people listening to this and watching this, they want to know how business is done here, how industry with monarchy works. As you say, there's a number of protagonists out there making Dubai the success story. 4 million people now live here. I've returned to live here specifically from America. How much interaction is there, Satim, between you perhaps and the other C-suite of Dubai for the future?
Well, it's quite honestly, it's quite a small family of people. Obviously, at the head of this, you have the government, which acts as a very strong government. It's a very focused government. It's a very inclusive government, and it is minded to do what you've seen in Dubai in the past, to do that in the future. I've never seen a focus in a government anywhere like this. And actually, it spans across the UAE in general. When you have that level of focus and that level of commitment and that kind of level of buy-in, and all the people in government working flat out to make it work, this starts separating it from other OECD countries, put it that way, who are constrained by many different forces at play. Dubai is very pure in the way it goes about it. It's business. It knows where it wants to go, what it needs to do to get there, the pace of which it's going to get there. And I'm not saying they know what the end game is, but I think they've got a pretty good idea of if things don't get disrupted here and they keep that focus. Part of that is the airline, part of that is the airport, part of that is power, all the segments of the economy. If they keep that going at the pace that they're doing, in the manner that they're doing, and don't forget, it's coming under a lot of stress.
Well, I was going to say that. Do you think they can keep going at that momentum? Because we're bursting to the seams. The traffic out there, the infrastructure of the city.
These are the signs of stress, which are part of a hugely successful economy. And the more you do, the more people want to come here. And they're making it very easy for the global workforce to come here and select the talent that they want to take this thing. It's a unique model. I have to be quite honest. It's unconstrained in many respects. And it's not nationality driven. It has no constraints. If you want to come and work here and you want to contribute to the business and add value to what they do, you're welcome to come and work there. And that is quite a unique offering.
I've got to say, when I called a few people and said I wanted to come back, the doors were open and the opportunities were there. Unconstrained, unbridled growth. 270 aircraft and change right now. What is unbridled growth for you? What would that mean? Fly a kite for the future.
Well, we have plans to 2041, 42. Yes. Obviously, you mentioned the 380's demise, and we've had to construct the acquisition of new aircraft, albeit smaller than that. And where are we going to be? And stress test that going forward to 42. And that sees a considerable growth in aircraft numbers. It sees a sizable growth in capacity in terms of our network and the points that we're serving in South America and Africa, more in the US, Asia. There's lots more to come. And coupled to the growth of Fly Dubai, which is very much, we're working very closely with them, then, you've got a fleets of 600, 700, 800 aircraft coming into that new airport. If there is no major interruptions. Frankly, I don't see any. Could we do it? Yes, we can. Could we scale what we're doing? Very easily. I keep saying to my guys, don't get fazed by any of this because you can do it. It's very easy to do it if you keep focused on it. Don't let yourself be sidetracked. Get on with it. So as I said, we will continue to grow. The airport in the Al Maktoum International Airport provides the real estate we need to do what we need to do going forward.
Speaking about real estate, what's going to happen to this when you move to DWC? Is this going to be just a mega property project?
I don't know. You better ask the government what they're going to do with it. I always have visions of a kind of like a New York with a big central park and a lake down the middle of it and tower blocks, because now there are no constraints on height. All around the fields you can see we're constrained on height because of the runways. So I can see another big city growing up here. And if it's master planned well and has recreation and greenery and all that bits and pieces, it'll be a showpiece.
Let's go. We've had the privilege, I've had the privilege of interviewing you for many years, and we always sort of tackle the issue of when an asset sale or an IPO might happen for Emirates. And you'll tell me, Manus, that's for the people who own the business. Do you think it's just too strategically an economic asset to ever be IPO'd? Again,
as I've always said to you in the past, it's not my call, okay? Even my boss will say that. It's a shareholder call. My own view is this. Mm-hmm. At the moment, the group is very, very profitable. It has a very strong balance sheet. It has a lot of cash on it. And the way the business is evolving as is being managed is that we see a progression of that. So in the end, why would you want to do that if you didn't need the money in the first place? That's for the government to decide. Secondly, talk about a pillar of the economy. Clearly, it is a pillar of the economy. It provides it provides the people power to the city. And it is therefore strategically very important that the government keeps some kind of control, one way or the other, of this very important asset. If you put it in the hands of third parties, the agendas tend to contra-rotate. And that may not suit what the government would want to do in the future. So in my own view, it's a very strong asset they have. Emotionally, a lot of the citizens of the city are very attached to it. They're very proud of it. And I think that unless the terms of trade, whatever you like, move against Dubai, I don't think that is something that they would do in the future. However, that's me speaking. I'm not a member of the government, so I wouldn't know.
Do you think if Etihad was IPO'd, it would put more pressure on Dubai to reflect on a strategic decision?
I think
because there's not healthy competition between Abu Dhabi and Dubai, isn't there?
I think some of the comments I've just made about why they wouldn't do it probably is still as strong as they would be if Etihad was to privatize.
Now, you're going to host Dubai Airshow in a couple of weeks. And I'm curious, in advance of that, I don't think you're going to tell me your plane orders, but how consequential, is that the right word for this Airshow 2025? Will it be consequential, Sir Tim?
Well, look, anything can happen. I don't know what other carriers are going to do, what other entities, stakeholders are going to announce at the Airshow. We'll have a few announcements to make. I'm not going to say what they are.
Big announcements, medium
we'll
announcements?
have some announcements to make. Look, in the 2 or 3 weeks prior to a Dubai Airshow, everybody is in here trying to persuade us to buy their wares. And they increase the pressure every day, as it gets closer to the day. So needless to say, Boeing, Airbus, everybody else is here trying to see whether we can do deals with them in the future. But of course, the difference is that both manufacturers are hamstrung with regard to their ability to produce airplanes at the time that we would want. We have 302 on order already, and they are unable, you just mentioned the 777X, to take on more orders probably before 2033, to be quite honest. So you're 6 to 7 to 8 years out before you can start receiving airplanes. So whether or not, people are going to make that commitment now, not just us, but in other people participating in the Airshow, will depend on how flexible they are as manufacturers.
As a CEO who's ordered many planes over the years, and as you say, they're coming over the doorstep here to convince you to do more, surely this is a gifted moment for you as a CEO to put pressure and extract a better deal on the future.
We're doing that.
With serious pressure on Ortberg?
We're doing it on both. We're doing it on both.
Do you think Kelly Ortberg is somebody that you can still have confidence in to deliver for you and for Emirates? Well,
I think, Kelly, again, talk about new kids on the block. He came in, a year or so ago, and if that. And I know he and Stephanie Pope and the team have been very focused on what they need to do, okay? And frankly, the corporation was in a little bit of a sorry state, and they've had to go from a very difficult position to try and get themselves into somewhere where they think they could be. Is Kelly the man to do it? Probably. When I look back at the number of people who have been the CEOs, chairman of Boeing in the past, I think we have a fighting chance with him and with Stephanie Pope trying to get it through. But it was Herculean. He was not going to walk in and wave a magic wand and get the thing sorted out. I've always said the Boeing situation was a 5-year problem. They would need 5 years to fix the way they went about manufacturing aircraft, the way that had declined since the mid-90s, And therefore, you could not expect that to be sorted out within a very short space of time. So when he came in, I thought by about 28, 29, 30, you'd see Boeing back the way it used to be, producing large numbers of aircraft of different variants, of different sizes, well and to a very high standard.
Tell me this, do you enjoy negotiating?
I spent my life doing it. I suppose I do. I've got teams of people that do it for me now, the ones I used to do, whether it be aeropolitics or aircraft or commercial.
And what's the secret you tell them? What's the secret for negotiations now? Look, boys and girls, this is the deal.
Well, outthink them. Know exactly what they're likely to be negotiating. Know their position, and then have the counter position ready before you enter the negotiations. And also, you've got to be fairly quick on your feet. You've got to think carefully. You've got to think articulately. Do not go off at a tangent. Do not overreact to things. Be measured about what you do, but be firm and fair about how you go about it. You know, if you're trying to consummate a deal, try and see that they need a margin. So do you. So somehow you get there. We've been with the manufacturers in the 90s, the 80s, and the 2000s. Sometimes we spend weeks over small points, but eventually, you know your customer. They do. They know the personalities involved. They know the negotiating styles. I have a bit of a reputation for being candid. I will say it as it is, yes, and if I don't like something, I will probably tell them that. And generally, it cuts through what I call the froth and the fluff. So you can get to the key points of what you want to deal with. They know, and I've come up against masters of negotiation on the other side of the table who will lead you down a path of triviality, trying to keep your mind off the main squeeze of the negotiations. And you cut through all of that and say, right,
tell me, who was the hardest then to negotiate with?
Airbus. Yeah, but they were great fun. It was like games of chess all the time. It was, and I think we got some really good deals as a result of all the work that we did with them. And funnily enough, on the sort of qualitative side of the negotiation side of things, we became friends. We knew each other. Hard-nosed when it came to the table, but professional, but socially, we built relationships. And because of that, they became extremely flexible and responsive to many things that we wanted to do, which was certainly, out of the normal run of things. One of which was the interiors of the 380s, the interiors of the 340-500s. And some of the aircraft, some of the product innovations we brought to Airbus before we brought to Boeing, because of the relationships we had established with them. And once we got the deals done and they knew we were going to buy a lot of their aircraft, they were ready to move on all the other things that we wanted to do. So,
Let's close off just with something a little bit more personal. I mean, you've been at the top for a very, very long time. What still excites you about running Emirates and this airport? It's an intoxicating kind of place. I've been coming since 1994. What excites you still?
Well, no day is the same. Currently we have Dar es Salaam issues. We had Madagascar issues. We've got an operation that, 270 aircraft flying flat out all the time, carrying upwards of 200,000 passengers a day. Something is going to be a little bit different every day of the week. And as you know, my rule to all the guys is a 24/7 operation. So all of you are on 24/7. If you don't want to be on 24/7, you're in the wrong business. So expect things to happen. Every time we leave for the weekend on Friday afternoon, say, all right, we've got 48 hours, anything can happen in that time. And it generally does. It's a buzz. I think people love the electricity of this business. They love the sparkle of Emirates. They love to be part of it. They enjoy coming to work. It's not easy.
Are you a difficult man to work for, Sir Tim?
I'm possibly considered to be a hard taskmaster, but I don't expect people to do things I wouldn't do myself in the end. We are such a big corporation now, and if your eye comes off the ball for a couple of days, things can happen. If you do not keep everything under a very, very strict control, we are centrists actually, this can run away from you very quickly. and the business needs TLC all the time. And as long as everybody, and I think we have a team of people now who are committed people who will work and go the extra mile for that. If you get that, it's a great buzz. You know, you're coming in every day, something is different. Some of these things are good, some of them are bad, some of them are absolutely ugly. And you have to deal with those. And it's no point hoping that it'll go away, because it'll never go away. As far as I'm concerned, the buck stops in my seat. And if I'm going to run away from it, then everybody else is going to run away from it. So that's not the way we do it.
And to close, sir, is there anything else that you'd like to achieve at Emirates before you, and we didn't talk about it actually, succession, but is there anything that you personally would like to do before you consider stepping away?
Well, as I said, I am trying to get a set of plans, set the die, so to speak, so that over the next 15 to 20 years, we know where we're going to go. We've got the new airport, we've got our fleets being sorted out, we've got our networks being sorted out, we've got a range of products coming out. I'd like to see that one get going, and then the successors to me and many of the others in the business are following a path that, if they follow that path based on what we have done in the past, they will be successful. If you deviate from that, for whatever reason, temptations as they may be coming forward, like you decide to acquire another business like milk powder or something like that, then you will find that difficult. Keep focused on what you're doing. Dubai has got a very long period of time going forward where it will be successful, because it does that. It doesn't change its model. It grows its model. It scales its model. And if we all do the same thing, then taken together with the city, I can see, you know, in 50 years, this being a serious player, more serious than it is today. So with me out of it, at least we would have set them on the path. It's up to them. What they do with it after that is up to them.
Sir Tim Clark, thank you for joining us on the
You're
Inside
welcome.
Brief on The National.
Thanks, Manus. Good to see you.